This is a Willets Point Shea Stadium bound 7 express train. The next and last stop is Willets Point, Shea Stadium.
Let's get into the outlook for each portion of this team and this roster. We're going to talk and start off with the Mets lineup, the Mets bench, and I made a little bit of a graphic here to post so we can check out. Here we go. Leading off Francisco, and this lineup right here, obviously subject to change, but I kind of took it from what SNY had posted. Seems a lot of other lineups are similar to that. Francisco Lindor leading off with Juan Soto batting second, Pete Alonso third, Mark Vientos fourth at third base, Brandon Nimmo left field and batting fifth. You have the combination of Starling Marte, Jesse Winker as your DH, Francisco Alvarez batting seventh, Jeff McNeil eighth at second base, and Jose Siri in center field. Now, the bench so far, either Marte or Winker, one of those guys is going to be on the bench for sure. You got Tyrone Taylor as well, Luis Torrens, and then that final spot, right? You got Nick Madrigal, you got Jared Young that can make a possible appearance, Luis Angel Acuna, Ronnie Mauricio, and I think I blocked his name by accident, Brett Beatty as well on the roster. How would you configure this lineup? Especially that the middle of the order, and this is a good problem to have, which I feel can go in so many different ways.
Yeah, this is kind of the vision that I have as well too. I know people are saying, well, let's hit Soto lower in the order. No, you want Juan Soto second because you want him getting the most number of at bats over the full season. He'll get more if he's batting second than he would third or fourth. The thing is about Soto, he's going to get on base. We know that Lindor is going to get on base too. So you have two guys that are going to get on base. So it'll be up to Alonso, Nimmo, and Vientos to try to drive them in. And all of a sudden you're fat, you're thick with some heavy bats. Like all of a sudden Marte and Winker are split in the DH spot. Alvarez is a 7 hitter. That's pretty good. It takes a lot off of his plate. He also can hit the ball out of the ballpark. Jeff McNeil and then Jose Siri can run into 25 bombs. I do still think you're going to have, probably a glove man coming off the bench. That's where Nick Madrigal fits in as, he's probably the equivalent of what Jose Iglesias is that as the game gets deeper, you have a lead. The Mets took Mark Vientos out of the game last year at third base late in the game to settle things down defensively. Maybe that's where Madrigal fits in. I think those kind of guys are important early in the year. I know the Mets probably want to get off to a better start this year than they did last year. That, of course, obvious, but winning those games, locking down games early in the season is crucial. So yeah, I mean that's pretty close. And to be honest with you, I know Brandon Nimmo got off end of the season poorly last year, but if Nimmo's strong and he's your cleanup hitter, I liked that move last year. The flip to get Lindor into the leadoff spot and Nimmo out of the leadoff spot. I know it hurt to look at, right? Because it's not what we're used to seeing, but it was terrific. And Nimmo ripped up the league in June. And then the plantar fasciitis thing is certainly concerning moving forward. But right now, Nimmo and Vientos, because of the lefty-righty thing, you have to kind of hit Nimmo ahead of Vientos. Or do you flip Pete, bat him fifth, and put Vientos third? You could probably do something there. But I like this Mets lineup. I mean, the bench is strong. I'm good with it. I mean, this is a lineup that I think can win a lot of games. It was amazing at the end of last year, and now you have Juan Soto who's going to get on base, half the time. So just go ahead and drive him in. Anybody in blue and orange, drive him in.
Joel C has a comment here that's interesting to me because we have seen Pete hit second, and he thinks Pete needs to hit second and have Soto hit behind him. If Pete hits behind Soto will never swing the bat, have 220 walks, and it will be like when he played with the Padres all over again. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, first of all, I totally get that. But, the Moneyball adage, can he get on base? And Soto gets paid all that money, not because he's the best hitter on the planet, but also because he's the best hitter on the planet and he walks. If you get on base and you create traffic, Lindor gets a base hit and Soto walks, first and second, nobody out, you will sign up for that inning every single time possible. And if you do that over the course of 450, 500 at-bats, and Soto's on base 200, 250 of those 500, the chances of him scoring are incredibly high. If he's hitting, third or fourth, he's going to maybe have 450 for the year, and you just want to increase the number of chances that he's getting on base, which is why I would hit him second. And listen, if he walks and Pete comes up and spots, this is why the Mets were so push and pull with Pete this year. you've got another chance. You're going to have the table set, drive them in. And if they can't do that, who are you going to find that's going to do that? You're going to have Soto on base every single time. You got to drive him in.
I know everyone wants to see the trio of Lindor, Soto, Alonso. It's all we've been talking about ever since, even before Pete signed the possibility. But is it weird that I'm more intrigued by the progression and maturation of Mark Vientos in another season and Francisco Alvarez coming back from injury? I think that's very intriguing to me.
Yeah, I mean, Vientos, I forget the exact number, but if you did what he did last year, over 162, you're looking at like 38, 39 home runs, which is crazy talk. I'd hope he comes close to that again. And you do worry about the sophomore slump, but, in the season of 162 games like last year, Mark would go through 3 or 4 games where he couldn't find it, and then he would snap out of it. 3 or 4 games where he couldn't find it,
Yeah.
and then he would snap out of it. And that is an indication that, okay, the league is adjusting to him because he's tearing it up. He'll figure it out again. And this year, think about the added confidence of just the full offseason to feel what he did last year. He's going to be great. And Francisco Alvarez, I am just waiting. I think we all feel it, right? It comes up in the 8th inning, guy's on base, and he takes that daddy hack on a heater or a breaking ball and misses, and the whole building is like, oh man, he's right there. And last year, that injury definitely slowed him down, where the clock in his mind, he looked up at the board and went, well, I hit 20 something bombs last year. I only have 3 or 4, and it's June, July. Like, I have to catch up. That game he played with himself that a young player will do, it screws you up because you want to do so well. So I think a fresh start for Alvarez. Again, he would be hitting 7th. Did you imagine he hits 30 bombs hitting in the 7th spot? It's possible if he can, figure it out this year.
When I go back to Mark Vientos, I know that there's always the talk about the sophomore slump, but I think he, going through that playoff run that he did, where he's probably had the second best playoff since the Daniel Murphy run in 2015. That's got to go a long way into not only confidence, but even with now the Mets keeping him at third base, I was a little concerned moving him after he just got comfortable. Obviously, not the best third baseman, but for what we needed, very serviceable and provided a great bat. Like you said, never slumped for a long period of time and was very clutch in big spots, especially in the postseason.
And that's a dream, right? For a team to have a young player that, think about all the names we've talked about. It's been Beatty, it's been Alvarez. Vientos was kind of on the back burner, and then he gets his chance and takes off. You just want one of these guys to figure out. They crushed it in the minor leagues, AA, AAA. Who's going to translate it up here? And Vientos did that. And in the postseason, you're right. He, even in Game 6 where they lost to the Dodgers, he hit that home run. You're thinking, here we go again. Maybe they make the comeback. And again, in the face of adversity in his life, in the face of adversity in the midst of a slump or in a game, Mark Vientos is unafraid. And that's a dream for a team because when you get up here, you have all the talent in the world for the minor leagues. You know how to do it. It's the attitude of, I can do it. I'm going to do it. Up here, I've already done it. Can I translate that? And that's why I think Vientos is so impressive. And the playoffs, it's scary. You're a young player. You don't want to screw up. The lights are bright. And then there's Mark with the sunglasses on, the big smile. He is swaggy V for a reason, unafraid. And again, it's just the beginning.
You mentioned Brandon Nimmo, and it's so crazy to think that he really did have a tough season last year. And even through that tough season, still was able to get 90 RBIs. To me is just wild. Is there any concern heading into this season with Nimmo and his foot? He, answering questions at Amazing Day, he did seem a little bit, worried about the foot and how's it's going in the progression of that injury.
Yeah, that's an injury, plantar fasciitis, that, it lack for a better phrase, kind of cripples anybody. Young, old, it's devastating to do that. You literally can't move. So I'm a little bit nervous by it. I think the Mets, looking ahead, can they find somebody that, maybe Nimmo is the guy that sits in place of Tyrone Taylor more often, just to get him back to normal. But if he can hit and without any pain or problems, and running is going to be hard, but if he can hit, Brandon Nimmo is one of those players that is never satisfied with his game. He signed that contract. and said, you know what, I want to add more power to my game. You know what, I want to steal more bases this year. Like, that doesn't happen very often with a player. I'm Pete Alonso, I'm going to hit 40 and drive in 100, and that's it. But you don't see somebody going, you know, I'm going to hit for average this year. I'm going to add more doubles. Or Pete Alonso saying, I want to steal more bases. Not to knock on Pete Alonso, but just players have an identity. Brandon doesn't have one and doesn't want one. He wants to continue to get better. And again, like Mark Vientos in mentality, it's all about having an edge up here, and Nimmo wanting that edge. I hope that he figured out the plantar fasciitis. This is actually a funny story. In L.A., getting on the bus to go to the stadium, I forget which game it was, but Brandon was certainly hobbled by the plantar fasciitis. I got an email on my phone from a fan that just said, I opened it up, and it was pages and pages of this person's cure for plantar fasciitis. And at the end, it says, can you please give this to Brandon Nimmo? So Brandon comes on the bus, and I go, hey, Brandon, have you seen anything like this? He goes, you wouldn't believe all the fans that are sending me, herbal supplements and do this, rest, ice, compression, elevation, relax. So he knows, fans know. I hope for Brandon's sake that they get it figured out, because spring is a lot of work. Spring training, we're going to know in 10 or 12 days how Brandon is feeling. And there may be some openings in the outfield if Nimmo is not an everyday player. I hope that's not the case, but that's how the Mets have to view it.
Blunt Thought Sports has a great comment here. It says the fact that all these different versions of the lineup, make it in a good way. It's all these problems to have is good problems. You really can't go wrong anyway. Having said that, he's intrigued by hitting Vientos second between Lindor and Soto. And we saw the Mets offense kind of light up. Once Lindor moved to leadoff spot, they put Vientos behind him. That 1-2 punch for a while was really, really good.
Yeah, again, that second spot in the lineup, I forget if it was Mike Trout when Trout was healthy, and then when Aaron Judge started to do his thing at like 2017-18, you're kind of going, where do you hit the best hitter, the best all-around hitter, the guy for average, the guy for power? And it turns out to be second, because again, you're at the end of the season, you're going to have more at-bats than if you hit third or fourth. It may be a few more, but you want to get up more than you're not up. So I like Vientos hitting second, but even in that Yankee lineup last year, Soto was hitting ahead of Judge. You want to get on base for those guys that are going to drive him in. And so Soto just happens to be the best all-around hitter in the game. I mean, I'm sure Aaron Judge would want to, punch me in the arm for saying that, but I like Vientos hitting second. It's not a bad thing that he's not, but Soto's going to be that guy for right now. And then they can move Vientos around too, because Vientos has such dangerous power to all fields. He can hit it out. He can hit one to right center into the gap. And that's why Vientos is such a weapon. And I'm with you. I mean, it's a deep lineup. You can do a lot of different configurations. I'm sure they will against righties and lefties. Who's off, who's not. It'll be a lot of fun for Carlos Mendoza this year to tool around with that stuff.